My name is Rocco. I've been here at Living Web Farms for, I don't know, 8 or 9 years, I suppose. We've been here on this property for about 6 years. We've had sheep for 4 years. We got them in the summer of 2012. We've had some success. We've had some things go really well, some things go fair, and I hope to tell you all everything I know and answer any questions you may have and help in any way I can. I'm excited y'all are here. Thanks for coming. I guess we'll dive on into it. We'll start with genetics and performance. We wanted sturdy animals. We wanted quality animals for meat. We weren't really too interested in fiber or whatnot, or wool or milk. We wanted animals that were as tolerant and as hardy to perform well in as close to a natural system as we could mimic, as we could create here on the farm. And that's where we started with our breed choice and with our animals. And our program has continued that since we've had them. We started with 20 sheep. We started with 2 rams and 18 ewes. And we'll go look at them here a little bit. We didn't want to worm them. We didn't want to cut the hair off of them. We didn't want to have to milk them. We didn't want to have to pull lambs out of them. We wanted them to grow and do well, perform on the forage that's available here. I don't want to put them in an air-conditioned barn when it's hot in the summer, and I didn't want to put them in a heated barn when it's really cold in the winter. Those were the criteria that our sheep had to meet. And I think that you'll find, if you're starting out with sheep or if you're looking for breeds or anything like that, that there's more diversity within a breed than within all of the breeds. It can be tricky to say, well, this is what I want. What breed is right for me? That's a hard thing to answer, because if you are starting out, or if you want to bring something in different to your farm, I would really suggest to start with a flock of animals that is being managed as closely to how you perceive and what you want to do a management style on your farm. So getting into performance, we want to see animals that are, again, not necessarily parasite free. We'll talk about those a little bit later on, but animals that are, doing well where we are. Ewes that are feminine, high estrogen, good body condition, and they give us a lamb or 2 or 3 every year. Generally, when you have a ewe on her first pregnancy, you can expect 1 lamb. Sometimes we've had a couple that have given us 2 on their first go-around. The year after that, we can expect 2 or 3, and we've had that pretty steady. Triplets aren't incredibly common, but they're always fun when they do come around, and it keeps mom really, really busy as far as that goes. Okay, any questions about any of that so far? Parasites. This is a real hot topic, one that a lot of folks are interested in. I want to breed parasite-resistant animals. I don't want to breed wormer-resistant parasites. This is what I mean. I think that I'm going to go back to, and you may hear me repeat myself a little bit, about this kind of give and take relationship that we have with the animals, that I have with the animals. And again, trying to fulfill what's in a natural system. What I mean by that is, somewhere off in the world where there's a bunch of sheep out living wild, or where all the sheep now came from originally, no one was worming them. No one was caring for them. No one was feeding them grain. No one was doing anything like that. So we know that these animals can survive in these kind of situations. More than anything else, it's been a big commitment on our part to the animals. We do not worm our sheep. We rely on their resistance, and we rely on our management program, which we'll get into later, moving them frequently, keeping them on fresh grass, and the resistance that they have within themselves. Are there any gardeners in the group? A couple? Well, the same thing is kind of happening, not so much on our little gardens, but with weeds and the kind of vegetable agriculture as it is to some degree in animal husbandry. and that we're developing super weeds because some of the weeds in these fields are resistant to the pesticides and chemicals that are being sprayed on them. And they get sprayed and sprayed, and after a while all these weeds build up a resistance to that and they keep on growing. It's really kind of the same thing with the animals and with wormers. They are developing these super worms where you have an animal that has some worms and you deworm it, and it'll clean it out, and yeah, it'll help, but after a while those parasites get a resistance and don't really feel any effect from the wormer that is being given to them. So that's our goal here, is to not have to have animals that need that kind of attention and that have those parasite issues. Be a good steward. We cull often, we cull early when we see parasite issues. It depends on how bad the infections can be and the outbreak within the animal. So that's going to come through monitoring and through always checking your animals and participating with them and making sure that that everyone's doing as good as they can be. And you can see issues, and there's a couple of there's FAMACHA tests, and there's generally what we see is a lack of thriftiness, smaller body condition. Body condition is a scale for cattle. It goes from 1 to 9. 1 is really super skinny, and 9 is really, really big and fat. So that's what I mean when I say body condition. We like to see our animals around 6 or 7. Full, healthy animals. When we see parasite issues, they lose that thriftiness, and you see a runny tail is what is the technical term. It's just a lot of diarrhea on it. When we cull those animals out, we do give them wormer. We do it in the barn, not out on the pasture when it's going through them. We get them off the property. We sell them. There's always ups and downs in life. You know, nothing ever really goes as planned. You know, you're always going to do this. But what I care about is doing this as opposed to doing this when it comes to building a resistance in the flock. So long as that number of animals gets smaller every year, I feel good about it because I know that we're making progress and I know that they're developing more of a resistance. The older animals that we have now on the farm at this point have pretty much proven themselves to be resistant. Mainly, they'll show issues if they're going to get them and if they're going to have those issues when they're younger and as lambs within the first kind of growing season, first couple months of their lives. The best thing you can do for your animals to keep them worm-free is move them, is keep them moving, keep them in a rotation, put them on fresh grass. The longer you keep them in a paddock and in an area that they've been in for a long time, the more susceptible they are to those worms without a recovery period for the land that they're on and for that grass and that sod that they're grazing. Let's jump into breeding real quick and talk about a couple things. Gestation on a lamb is 5 months, and with our breeding program, we try and select for rams that have high levels of testosterone and ram lambs that show a high level of thriftiness and testosterone. High levels of testosterone lead to high sexual hormones within the animal, and that leads to a good, strong, healthy breeder. We're also looking for the 8 and 5 package. This is a concept that I'm learning about recently, but I think I'm starting to get the hang of it. So we talked about body condition, and we'll talk about a moment for frame size. Frame size essentially means what it sounds like. It's kind of how big the animal is going to be within their bone structure, let's say, as opposed to body condition, which is just their weight. We try and select for animals that have a smaller frame size for a couple reasons. They tend to display a better body condition. Animals with a smaller frame size, they eat more, they have more relative intake, and they eat more given the percentage of what they are compared to a larger animal. But as an overall amount of just what's there, they actually end up eating less. A field mouse has more relative intake than an elephant, okay? And that relative intake and that smaller frame size means that the animal can maintain a better body condition. That's kind of how that all works out. So when we're looking at rams, we're looking for a good body condition, a smaller frame size, if we can get it, and also early sexual maturity. That's what we're after in our rams. We'll take a look at the rams here later, and we'll be able to see some of those differences with the ones that we have now. We'll also be able to see some in the ram lambs that we have out in the field here today. Something I would really encourage all of y'all to do, try and select an appropriate lambing season. Always remember that the nutritional demand on a mother ewe is going to be in that last month of those 5 months. It's that last month. That's when she needs the most feed and the most food and the most nutrition, because she's doing her lambs are doing the most actual physical growth. So it's really important to try and have her lamb when she has an appropriate nutrition. That's generally kind of a rule of thumb, is 30 to 45 days after the spring flush comes. We put these animals out here this year on March 22nd. That's when we started starting this year's grazing program. And we lambed right around the middle of April. And that was good, that was appropriate. It's always a little tricky sometimes when you're getting into the whole April-May time frame, because you know, generally what happens, at least here, I don't know how it is for you guys on your farms, but in this little spot in Mills River, April's really, really nice, first 2 or 3 weeks. And then right around the 3rd or 4th week of April or so, it's certainly very possible and likely for there to be 2 or 3 nights of below freezing weather. Year before last, that was the only lamb I lost. It was mid-April, nice warm, mild beginning to the month. Around the 3rd week of April, right when we were lambing, starting to lamb, just for one night, it was going to be 30 degrees. And I was going in there, I was sleeping in my house, and I was thinking to myself, well, I wasn't sleeping, I was up thinking about it. You know, gee whiz, if we have a lamb tonight, it may or may not make it. The thriftiness of a newborn lamb is amazing. They'll come out, they'll slick off, mom will give them all the attention, they'll dry off, they'll get up on their feet, they'll get some colostrum. And when we are lambing, that's what I'm looking for out of the lambs, just to make sure they're up, make sure they're on their feet, make sure they're doing well. But they do come out pretty helpless, for that first little bit, they do come out helpless and cold and wet. So if they're born when it's 28 or 30 degrees out, you know, they're going to have a harder time. Next year, when we lamb in 2017, I'm actually going to kick it up 2 weeks, just for that reason, just to get past kind of a perceived danger zone, if you will, in late April. We're going to attempt to start lambing right around the 1st week of May. And I would encourage you guys to do that, and I would encourage you guys to think about that for the health of the lamb and the warmth, and also, again, 30 to 45 days after the spring growth, so mom's got at least a good month to eat that nice spring fresh grass and do good on that nutrition level. What that means, you know, you just kind of work backwards. Let me think about that for a second. January, February, March, April. So December 1st, I'm putting the rams in. That's what that means, in an effort to work backwards and have that foresight and see that coming. As far as when the rams go in and in this breeding cycle, when we do introduce the rams, we keep a real close eye on them. That's kind of their time to shine, if you will. And that's when they show their thriftiness. And we want to see them servicing as many ewes as possible. Just kind of a little side note, it was this ramming season of this past year where, and we'll see them later and I'll point them out to you, but we had a big paddock. It was right out here. And a coworker and I were working out in the field, and we heard this ruckus, just this huge impact. And I thought it was a car wreck or something like off in the distance, and we looked up, and buddy, those two rams were going as far away from each other as they could and just meeting in the middle. And they were having a time at it. And it wasn't just once. They were, I'm boss. No, I'm boss. No, oh, let's fight about it. Okay, boom. And one kind of got his egg scrambled a little bit there for a second. In all honesty, a couple of those impacts, I thought, man, they're going to kill each other. That's okay. That's fine. Those are the two macho guys displaying their macho-ness. That's fine. That's that thriftiness. That's that testosterone level that we want and that they're displaying. Keeping a close eye on our rams, making sure that they're servicing as many ewes as possible, and also figuring out and understanding who is the most, who's alpha, who's getting the most, who's doing the best job, if you will. If you have 2 rams and 18 ewes, one's gonna be dominant. If you've got 200,000 ewes and whatever, 10,000 rams, whatever the case may be, one's going to be dominant. And that's that thriftiness that we want. So that's what we look for in our breeding season. Again, we work backwards in this aspect, in this regard. We determine how long we want our actual lambing season to be. And that, when we turn the rams in, is how long the rams stay there. We like to have a shorter lambing season for some management issues, for some management reasons. One of them being, if I am going to select for next year's rams, I've got a much closer age group to work with. And I'm getting more of kind of, when I'm selecting, everything is more kind of the same and on the same kill and on the same level. We, for a time, left our rams in there until Mama had her first ewe, or excuse me, the ewe had her first lamb, and just left them in there in that whole season. And it was easier from a point of view of, the rams aren't separate or anything like that. But we ended up with a really long lambing season. And so when it was time to come and cut out and cull out or select for rams or stuff like that, we'd have a ram this big and we'd have a little tiny ram, small guy. And it wasn't anything to do with frame size or body condition. At that point, that was to do with age. So to tighten that up, we're tightening up our breeding season. Again, in the big scale world of sheep and all these animals without human influence, their lambing season is short. All these wild animals and the deer and everything like that, it's really short. Mainly in that regard to cut down on parasites, on predators.
How do you get the rams to mate in a short period of time as opposed to like letting them space it out?
Good question. I had the same one myself. I said, well, the rams aren't going to know that they've got a limited time period. They're not going to know that they've got 30 days because they used to have 3 months. How am I going to do that? And it's a matter of having enough rams, which if you give your flock in breeding time enough rams to work it out, and then you can also, during the breeding season, you can select the ones that are the best. But it's also kind of the performance of the flock itself and making sure that they've all been bred within a given amount of time. Basically, to answer your question, I did about 15, 18 ewes per ram. That's what I figured was about good. When you put that on a 30-day thing, you figure you got, even if it was 20 ewes, he's got 30 days. One has 30 days to breed 20, which for those guys is really, really doable. And you also, so you find that kind of balance in there in that medium. It's a matter of keeping your flock really efficient. But I had the same question myself, and I was a little worried about it. But we had a good lambing season. Appropriate amount of rams, I think, is the answer to that.
Do the ewes just go in season when you introduce the ram?
Right before I'm about to do it, for about 2 weeks, I'll separate them with the fence. Or I'll put them close enough to where they're pretty close to each other, and that'll kind of start their cycling a little bit quicker. Within that, you need to determine your lambing season, and within that, make sure that your lambs or your ewes are cycling at least twice. I think it's 21 days. So, and it's funny, we'll go look at it and I'll show you. A month before I wanted to put the rams in this past year in 2015, they were across the fence from one another, from the whole flock. And they were right out here at the very end of the farm, and they were right in front of what I call the pig house. We've got a couple of hogs out there. And it was, let's see, it was late September, and I was walking down there with a bucket of pig feed, and it was kind of a warm afternoon, and the rams were asleep in the shade. There's one little shade tree. Here's the fence, here's the tree, here's the shade. They weren't from me to you, away from the fence. And I was just walking down there minding my own business, and I saw them, but they didn't really see me. Anyway, long story short, they woke up and they looked at me, and I had entered their kind of flight zone. I was a little bit too close for comfort. 2 of them, right through the fence, right into the flock. And that's also, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but also that's a perfect lesson, and understand that electric fencing is a mental barrier. It is not a physical barrier. They can go through it if they really want to. Keeping your animals moved, keeping them happy, they really don't challenge it too much. But it's not like an 8-foot chain link fence or something that's going to physically keep them out. Anyway, long story short, so I said, well, this sucks. I got to get the rams out of there. And there's no walking in there and like catching them. I had to bring them all in here and sort them all out. And they were in for, those 2 rams were in for 40 minutes. And they bred 9 ewes. And we'll go out here and I'll point them out to you, because actually one of the rams from that birth I really like. And then so we had 9 lambs over about a 30-hour period, a month before I wanted to have any lambs at all. So you'll see them out there. We'll go take a look at them here in a bit. Yeah, that's it. It was like literally a dream come true for the rams. By the time they knew they were awake and they had gotten over the shock of being scared, they were in with all the ladies. And that whole process was 2 seconds. I mean, it really was. And they immediately started sniffing and having a good sexually mature, sexually aggressive ram is a good thing for breeding and getting that getting your flock taken care of in a shorter amount of time if you want to tighten up your lambing season. He even started sniffing the steer, but that's another story.
What's the breed of the? You have a mixed breed, I think.
We have a cross between 2 heritage breeds. We have a St. Croix and a Gulf Coast native is the cross that we're running right now. We chose those for heat tolerance and parasite resistance. And that was an added perk. Again, it was more so that the farm that they came from was doing it how I wanted to do it. So, and we started with animals that hadn't been wormed in a long time. But they came from Missouri, which is a similar climate, but yeah, it's pretty far away. It's still Missouri. They have more extremes over there in weather and grass quality and so on and so forth.
Would you say that they're like 50-50 mix, or is it heavier on one side?
I think it's pretty close to 50-50, and that's me scratching my head. I don't quite recall something pretty close to that. Okay, grazing. We do non-selective high-density grazing. So I could let all the sheep out here in this big field and just let them kind of have at it. That's selective grazing. And what's going to eventually happen is I'm going to end up with a field. They're going to go out there, and there's things that they like more than other things. Some things are toxic to them, some things are unpalatable during a season, some things they really love. they're going to go out there and, buddy, they're good at it. Don't think for a second they won't, and eat exactly what they want first. And then they're going to kind of eat what they kind of want second, okay, yada, yada, yada. And it's going to go down that line. And so eventually what happens is a couple things. One, you can end up with a field full of plants that your animals don't really want to eat. It's unpalatable to them, or it's toxic to them, or for whatever reason, they've left it alone. So it's had a chance to be left alone and thrive. While the stuff that is desirable to them has been continuously grazed. Another thing is eating what they really want for a long time, and then eating what they kind of want for a shorter amount of time, and then kind of running out, yada, 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 that can fluctuate with their rumen and their gut, and the microbiology and the microbes within their gut. So we try and avoid that as well. Another thing that'll happen is we'll talk about this in a moment, you'll end up with overgrazed pasture and compacted soils. What we do here is, it depends on the season and the situation. Again, we'll take a look at it. Basically, in the summer, I move the sheep twice a day. The trampling effect and the soiling effect, they do not want to come back and eat grass or plants that they've already walked on, manure, urea. That's not going to be very palatable to them. So if we give them kind of a smaller but more frequent amount of it, they have less of an ability to soil it. They have less of an ability to trample it. So also with high density grazing, we're utilizing the available forage that we have. Non-selective grazing is, we're putting them in there really close and tight, and they don't really feel that ease and that space and that time to just kind of wander around and eat whatever they want. They eat very quickly, not in an unhealthy manner, don't get me wrong, not in a stressed manner, but they kind of figure, if I don't get it, my buddy will. So they're going to go ahead and have at it. And it's this concentrated animal impact that we're left with in that paddock. Out of the growing season, just to give you an idea, out of the growing season in winter, from about December until mid-March, we move them 4 times a day in our stockpiled area. We'll go move them here in a little bit. It's not that bad. It's a little bit of a pain, but seriously, it's not. 4 times a day sounded really rough to me when I made the commitment to do that, but it's not that bad. It does, and if you have the infrastructure in place, it can be pretty easy to do and very enjoyable as well. The animals really love it. That's another thing. The animals really, really, really like moving like that. They really like being together like that. And they like that high concentrated animal impact. I mean, they don't like it, but if you do look at the the great grasslands, of America or of the Serengeti, you hear those kind of examples a lot. The great grasslands of the planet, you will find a high concentration of animals moving frequently and having a lot of impact on the soil they left behind. And they don't come back to it for a really long time until it's had time to recover. And so we're mimicking that here on the farm. Fertility. Okay, here's what our fertility program looks like. It's kind of 4-part. It starts with photosynthesis. These plants are capturing the sunlight's energy, and they're taking carbon dioxide, nitrogen gases out of the air and soil in the water, and they're creating simple sugars. That's kind of the catch-all process of photosynthesis. Then kind of the next step that happens is a process called resynthesis, which through a series of a bunch of kind of chemical reactions and doing all the wild and crazy magical stuff that plants do, basically what's happening is that those simple sugars are being resynthesized into carbon compounds, like proteins, oils, carbohydrates, and acids. Okay, that's the process that the plant is doing with what's available to it. We hear a lot about carbon these days, and it's an important carbon and sequestering carbon. And I think it's important to ask the question why, and I think one of the big reasons, there are a lot of reasons, but one of the big reasons is that carbon is kind of the skeleton is kind of the framing for a lot of other elements to bond onto, and that's why carbon is so important in our soils. So through this resynthesis process, a lot of the carbon is forming that skeleton structure, and it can bond together, and things like hydrogen and oxygen can then bond to it. So that's helping to build and stabilize our soils. Then we move on to exudation, creating exudates in the soil. About a third of that carbon that's been sequestered during the photosynthesis process is exudated into the roots and through those simple sugars, and that feeds the microbes in the soil. What really fosters that whole process is root growth, root depth, and root development, which then is happening all on top too by, again, a long recovery period and a lot of above soil plant life. Lots of growing points. And then humification. Then those microbes that are on the exudates of the root are resynthesizing the carbon and all that stuff that they're getting, and they make it into humus, humification. And humus is very stable, it's very complex, but it's stable within the soil. And that's how we build fertility on our farms. Carbon, otherwise, if it doesn't have that humification process, is kind of unstable, and generally it's released back into the atmosphere. So, what is Rocco talking about, right? Right? That's what I'm thinking if I'm in your chair. Couple things. Let me really encourage you guys to prove me wrong, and I'll tell you why. You could spend the rest of your life, I'm going to tell you straight, this is what I think. You can spend the rest of your life studying soil, and it won't be a life wasted, and you won't get bored. It is absolutely fascinating. It is absolutely complex. Why am I saying this? Why is this important? Because if you're growing lambs or vegetables or fruit trees or hogs or whatever, the list can go on and on and on. It's all going to come back to the health of your soil, to the health of your product, to the health of you, to the health of the people you're feeding, to the health of your farm, in your town, in your county, in your region, in your state, in your country, on your planet Earth. You cannot separate any of that stuff. It's all going to come back to the health of your soils. It's a fascinating subject. There's a lot of synergy with it. That's how we got our name. That's why we're Living Web Farms. Okay? Prove me wrong. Take a soil class. You're tooling around on the internet, look up some soil science stuff. It's really, really interesting. I can't encourage y'all to do that more. That and a correct lambing season are like kind of my big points, okay? Don't get caught up in the complexities of it. Understand them, try and know what is going on and try and understand the big picture. What does this mean? Okay, I need exudates. Okay, I need humus. That comes from exudates. That comes from microbes on the roots. I need a bunch of roots. I need a bunch of green growing points. That's another great reason for high density grazing. Because the closer the heavier animal impact I have, the less I'm shading the growing points of the grass and the forbs out there in the pasture. The more sunlight they're getting, the more the spacing within the plants, the more those seeds in that seed bank are able to germinate, the more grass we're growing, and our production in our fields just went up. Not only in the matter of actual available food that they have, but also in the ability for that stuff to do its thing, feed those microbes, and build that fertility. I would also really encourage you guys to there's a bunch of good information out there. We'll do kind of a resource thing here in a little bit. This is big stuff. Alan Savory's got a TED Talk about, reversing desertification, and climate change. I mean, we're talking about taking carbon out of the atmosphere and storing it in the earth where it belongs. Through animals on your farm while you can make money and you can provide food. That's really big picture stuff. I would encourage you guys to check that out. So that's our basic fertility program. Spreading compost helps. Compost tea, compost extract help. Multi-species grazing help. All those things help. They're all tools in your tool belt, okay, that you can apply during different agricultural situations or what's available to you.
Rocco, do y'all do any cover crops or reseeding or anything for the health of your pastures, or is it just from grazing?
We have done just grazing in the pasture itself. As it worked out with you guys here today, we're in a field across the street where we also do some vegetable work. So they're actually grazing cover crops now. But in the pasture, we don't reseed, and we haven't done that. I would like to, and I would like to play with that for extending season in the winter. I'd like to come in fall after they've come off a paddock, or late summer, and drill in some kales, some turnips, some radishes, some other brassicas, and have them come on and have a little bit more production and a little bit more available for them in the non-growing season, in winter. But having said that, the answer to your question is we haven't planted a seed out here since we got here. Never limit your animals. Their performance and their body condition as it pertains to your grazing is going to come through their health, through your monitoring, through your checking them out, through your observations and that observational process. Your eyes are going to turn into, or already are, absolutely your best tool. Don't limit your animals. If you need to supplement them with feed, or you need to supplement them with protein or hay or whatever the case may be, that's better than not giving them what they need. When we go move them, we'll talk a little bit more about that. Understanding time on the farm. I just wanted to take one quick second and tell y'all something real quick. When the neighbors drive by and they see all these little sheep in this little tight little spot, they come up to me and they say, "Rocco, you're overgrazing your pastures and you're compacting your soils." And I say, if there was one horse on this farm, and I put sweet feed and hay in that red barn that y'all saw, and I put his water bucket down in the woods on the other side of the farm, put automatic water on it, hooked up to the hose, no leaks, always full, plenty of great water. Say we did that and say we came back this fall. Just leave, come back. He'll hang out in the barn, he'll eat a little grass, yada, yada, yada. But what you're going to find is a path from the barn to the water, from the water to the barn. That continuous walking on that same area, that continual aspect, is what compacts soils. Again, a good reason for for high density grazing is that we can compact that animal impact, but it's a really long time before we bring them around again. That path, and the reason I use that analogy is because that's what happened, and I can walk you down there and show you the path. You can barely see it, but it's still there. There was a horse here when we came here. Compaction is the result of that. It's one animal walking on one area for 365 days, as opposed to 365 animals walking on one area for one day. That won't compact your soils, okay? Overgrazing is the same thing. If that stool is a grass plant, your animals come and they eat a little bit, they eat 6 inches, and they wait a couple days, whatever, go, blah, blah, and come back and eat more 4 or 5 inches, and then wait, blah, 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 and then come back. That plant never has time to regrow and to bounce back from that impact. And that's, again, is what causes overgrazing in your fields. We take it down pretty tight, but again, that long recovery time gives that plant an ability to recover, and the soil and all the health and everything that comes with that. Are there any questions? Let's take a little break and go move some sheep. This farm, we got it on a map, and it's broken up into 26 little paddocks, little squares, which is just how I happen to kind of put up my fences and whatnot. That's where I put my paddocks. We started March 22nd with the sheep over there. That's where they started. And we're going to stroll over here. I believe that this is recovered long enough. So over there in that corner is what a 60-day recovery period looks like, right? All that is for winter. That's all stockpile, okay? On a personal note, I'll tell you that I've become a lot more strict of mapping things out and writing things down and taking everything like that, and I love it. I'm doing a great job of it this year, and I really encourage it. I really love it. Record keeping helps you tremendously. Weeds have a really hard time withstanding that animal impact. If the animals don't eat it, they're so tight together it gets trampled. If the animals don't eat it, the microbes will. Okay? And eventually you end up with different kinds of grasses and less weeds. We're pretty, every year we get a little bit more weed free just through the act of grazing. Also, out in here, look, right here. See, this is what I'm saying. All this stuff here, if I graze this down heavy, see there's got a clump of grass and a clump of grass, and here's a big clump and yada yada. So if we graze this heavy, that allows that sunlight and that photosynthesis process to reach these growing tips, okay? And again, it was very clumpy kind of when we got here. And more we're seeing these spaces fill in with more and more grass. It takes time. It absolutely takes time. But see over here, this is a really nice area. See, now imagine the production, the more production I have here because we're growing more grass in this little area as opposed to that little area. So slowly but surely it's working.
Do your sheep eat this stuff?
They don't eat the stems, but they'll knock it down and trample it.
What I've been doing is I've been mowing like about this high to try to get rid of this stuff, whatever this is, because I didn't think the sheep would eat it.
Mm-hmm.
So I have pastures just like this, and I come and mow about this high to try to get rid of these seeds so it doesn't reseed, and that way that's more palatable grasses can. I was just wondering what your thoughts on that were. Am I just wasting my diesel?
I think that higher, more mature grasses tend to have more energy for the animals and kind of more growing tips, and that top third of the plant can provide a lot of that energy for the animals. You know, man, I'm trying hard to accomplish all this stuff just through grazing. Now, I'll put them in a spot and get them to graze it as hard as I can. I mean, get them to have the high density, high animal impact effect, move them off of it, and if we have a bunch of weeds and stuff left, we'll come in there and mow it down. Okay. I especially like doing that in winter. And down on the hill, like right over there, there's this big steep hill, and even out front a little bit, it's really, I've had the most difficulty out there. It's covered up in briars and brambles and wisteria and all this other stuff. I will kind of supplement with hay in the winter because the grass in that time of year tends to be not fibrous very much. So to kind of help balance their rumen, I'll give them a little bit of hay. It's real wet, it's real watery, you know, it's winter time. So I give them that hay to kind of help their gut out a little bit. And also into spring. So they started there in March. This is probably April. I could tell you actually real well. This is probably second, third week of April is when they were in here. So by the time they get back here, now I'm on that, again, third week of March, now I'm on about a 60-day recovery period. So by the time they get over here, this will be that much taller. And then now my whole cycle and those number of paddocks are all on the same recovery period. There's definitely a noticeable difference in this and this. But again, you know, this is coming up for stockpile. Also, if there's some horrible, devastating drought or something bad happens, I got all this grass to get into as well. We'll talk a little bit more about stocking rate on the farm when we get over here. Basically, we're still growing our numbers. We are going to do it'll make sense when we look at them. We're going to do a big coal and a big sheep sort next week. with the animals, and then we'll determine if we want to bring in some more animals, which we'd love to bring in. I'd love to bring in some cattle and have some multi-species grazing happening out here, which we've had good success with in the past. What I personally am trying to do with this stockpile is not feed hay. If I can have X amount of animals here, keep them here all year long, and only have to supplement a little bit of hay here and there, that's our carrying capacity, okay? And that will fluctuate year to year as fertility increases and as you have different weather or different seasons and different weather throughout the year, giving you different amounts of forage. You guys see that back fence? See the chicken fence? Don't touch it. See the one in the back? Yeah. See that little hill? Mm-hmm. That's where the sheep last were. That's where the sheep were last. That's about a 2-week recovery period over there. We'll take a closer look at it when we come back. Again, grazed heavy, high animal impact, long recovery period. If I'd gotten out of there and there were a bunch of weeds or a bunch of non-desirable plants growing, I'd come in and cut it and cut that stuff down. And eventually, through that and through the grazing impact, you'll start growing more grass. Keep in mind, we're predators. They're prey. Not in the sense that they're hair sheep and yeah, we're there for meat. I don't mean that. When the sheep see us coming, they don't see a harmless individual. They feel threatened. It's not about what you think, it's about what they think when you're working with your animals, okay? Mainly the chattering and stuff we're hearing now are a couple lambs kind of playing and hanging out and kind of just making sure and seeing where mom is. I don't see tons of restlessness. I don't hear tons of bawling. I don't see that they're super stressed out. That's what I'm looking for when I approach the animals. And I also see that the area they're in was grazed pretty heavy. Let's go take a closer look. We just got done lambing, so I'm not going to put the rams in until December 1st. So they're separate now, so I can control my lambing season. Look at the one in front, just looking at us. She's got a good, nice gut. She's slicked off, so they're doing well. And you know, some aren't. Not that they're not doing well, but see her right as she just walked in the sun? Mm-hmm. We'll take a closer look and we'll get on this fence. But there's a couple in here that are kind of my showcase animals. Look at that big gut on her, and the one behind her is thinner. Mm-hmm. You can see she's down a body conditioner too. Okay? So we're going for that. And you can cull as hard and as heavy as you want to select for that. I've never done a really hard culling. In fact, I've never culled for selection for that 8 and 5 package that I forgot to talk about. She has the 8 and 5 package. She's like, hey, how you doing? You know? She looks feminine, she has an estrogen level, she's slicked off. We'll take a closer look so you know what I'm talking about. The 8 and 5 package is a concept that I'm learning about through my teacher, Jimmy, and also he's available. There's a lot of good information, by the way, available, guys, at livingwebfarms.org. There's a great 3-day grazing class. It's about cattle, but all the same stuff apply. They just happen to be talking about different animals. Johann Zietzman, envision in your mind's eye what 5 pounds of flour looks like in a 5-pound bag, a bag that is made to hold 5 pounds.
8.
Now, envision 8 pounds in that 5-pound package. That's what we want our animals to look like. I'm not talking about fat. And again, I am trying to have smaller frame size. Smaller framed animals with an 8 and 5 package. That's what we're going for. I don't want tall, I don't want lanky, I don't want skinny, because then you're getting into a 9 and 10 package. 9 is more than 8, I don't dispute that, but the 8 and 5 package is what we're after. Look at this lamb nursing, wagging her tail. See that? That's a big lamb. We'll take a closer look. See how it's got to get on its knees? That one might be one of the older batch. And that's a sympathetic mother. I shouldn't say that, but see how she just kind of walked away? She's not paying it much mind. I don't wean the lambs. Mom weans the lambs. At some point, that little lamb's gonna do that and literally like pick mom up, and she's gonna say, go get your own food, okay?
So Rocco, while you were talking to Mark and Lauren, they were asking how long they've been on this pasture here. It's been a half day, is that right?
Okay, that's a good question. A couple things are happening here. There goes everybody.
No, there's fresh pasture.
Oh my good sheep. Now these guys are in the mineral bucket, okay? We'll go look at the mineral. See this one? Look, here's a good example. See that one? Moving slow, still really heavy, or excuse me, still lots of hair. Got its tail kind of up. That animal's not doing too well. You know, I left him in here on purpose. I want you all to see that. He's not doing hot, he or she, probably a he. So, look at that one playing, see that? So he will be cold. He's not gonna, I'm at least gonna check him out. See, that's that daily monitoring, observe your animals. So now you come out here and like I saw him earlier, now I see him again. I'm gonna check him out. When we run him through, I'm gonna look at him or her and see what the issues are and see if they need help. But that animal isn't doing too hot. And for the most part, all the other ones are. Let's take it, okay, so. Because of the lay of the land here, we also grow vegetables. What we're seeing and what they just got onto, we're gonna look at it. This isn't grass in the pasture. This is a mixture of annual cover crops that are cool season crops. And now it's getting warmer, so we're putting them on this. In an effort to transition this field into a warm season cover crop rotation. What's all that mean? It means that they've been here since, let me think, this is Tuesday. They've been here since last Wednesday is when they went over there, okay? One thing about building these paddocks, I call these breaks. I don't know what the people probably have different names, but see the big space we're in? I call those breaks, right? And this is one of my little numbers in my little book. And so I can come out here and put the animals in, and I do it every time there's a new break, depending on their nutrition, where they are, what they need, where the grass is. And I can sell it 1, 2, 3, go straight, come back. Is there still stuff left over? Is there still grass left over? Are they bawling? Are they wild and crazy because they want more food? And then I kind of figure it out. It takes 1 or 2 days, and they'll tell you what they want. And then you can come here and count, and you say, all right, I'm going to be in here for 10 days, okay? I am kind of trying to damage this stuff and kind of trying to overgraze it. This is annual crop. I don't want it here. I want to transition into something else, okay? All those concepts and things that we talked about, they all apply, but I think it's good that y'all see that we're not in the pasture on the grass. We're in kind of a different situation. You can see where they have more impact there than here, okay? It's because of this fence, this back fence. See, and when we put them in here, you guys stay right where you're at. They were probably only to here. You see the difference in where, in this area and that area, there's more grass there. As those paddocks get bigger, and they have more space, you lose that animal impact because they have more space, because there's less of an impact here. And the only reason we did that and kind of let this area go is because, again, we're transitioning into a summer annual cover crop. This isn't regular grass and fescue and stuff that's in the field. This is vetch and clover and peas, again, annual cover crops. It's higher in nitrogen, and you got to be a little bit more careful when you're feeding it to them. Okay, so I'm just balancing it out with the hay. It's not that I need hay because there's a lack of food. I'm helping to supplement what's happening in their gut. I don't think every single lamb every single year has to challenge the fence and learn from themselves. I think that they just kind of get it. And then you will have some escape artists. We've got about 4 escape artists here.
Which is much better than last year, right?
It is. And it gets better every year. Let's all take a closer look. We'll see about some of this 8 and 5 stuff. And
so you just start with one strip, and then you increase it every day or two, and the paddock gets bigger and bigger.
Right.
And then you'll move them like back there or something.
Right. So next they'll go over there.
Okay.
Right. So in this whole entire field, they started in that corner. That's where they started in this whole entire field. This little part over here, they're not going to go in because we're going to grow vegetables there. That was crimped and incorporated in a different way. This will be grazed, and then that'll be grazed, right? Then I'll take them across the street and put them back by those trees where they started in March. So some have slicked off, some haven't, meaning they're shedding that winter coat. That one scraggler that we saw who looked kind of rough, he hadn't slicked off yet. Little lamb guy's checking out the world all by himself. That's pretty cool. We've had a pretty good, successful lambing season this year. Again, we're going to do our big cull, our big sheep sort at the end of this month. He's calling to Mom. He's just saying, "Mom, where are you at?" There's fluctuation within the flock. Again, I'm wanting smaller framed, heavier set animals that are doing well with what's being given to them. That's basically all I'm after. Ones that aren't making the cut, so long as that number is small and gets smaller every year, then we're making progress. This is a high level of animal impact. We'll come in here and plant a summer cover crop, and these animals won't be back here again till the end of this summer. As far as the stockpile, again, in that growth and that slow recovery period, so next spring, next March, when I put the animals out, it won't be in the spot I started with this year. It'll be in the spot you looked at down the hill where the stockpile is this year. So I'm moving that stockpile around. Is that making sense? When I come in here, you can see where they were. You can see right here that we could have left them in here a little bit longer and had more of an animal impact, as opposed to over there where they've gone the most. Okay, so that spot behind us is where they started, so it's going to inevitably have the most animal impact. And as you increase that area, you lose that animal impact. I could also, and I did this last year, just keep leapfrogging yourself with your fences to maintain the same amount of impact. And that's more like what we do over here. Here I'm not too concerned about it, again, because this is an annual crop and we're going to come in and do something else.
But if you wanted more impact, couldn't you just not move them out of this section a little longer, and wouldn't they come back in here and graze once they took that down further?
That's a great question. I could, but I don't want to. If I want more impact here, then I should have left them. I don't want to make them eat that and come back and have to eat this. Again, they will, but they really aren't going to want to. You know, also for
parasites in here too. You don't want them putting them on this because they're, now there's parasites.
Right, yeah, right. There's fresh over there, so yeah.
Yeah. So again, keep them moving, keeping them away from their parasites. And that parasite cycle we were talking about earlier, I wish I could get a straight answer, but I can't. But I know it'll be months before they're back here. And it'll be a totally different crop. Those little lambs will be the first one to come out here and lay down. Because they don't need it as much. Maybe they're just learning how to eat and they're still getting some milk. Plus it's really super big and tall for them, and maybe some of them get scared of the big stuff. This one right here, eating, she's slicked off. She's got a nice gut. She just wagged her tail. You see, you got a little spot behind her shoulder. That's a good looking ewe. There's nothing wrong with her. She's fine. That may be a wether. A wether is a year-old ram lamb that we're gonna eat. So that's another thing as far as That's a good shot. See this one head on?
Yeah.
Look at that neck and that big gut. Right, so we're getting to that 8 and 5. Yeah, she's got a great big gut. That's a good animal there. She's cool to see her with horns. There's one sheep in this whole flock that has horns, and that's her. She was an original. Just some old gene resuscitated and she grew horns. She's a really good ewe. She's a good mom. I see a good gut. That's a wether. That's a male. I see it. He just went behind that one. That's another wether. He's fine. He just hasn't slicked off yet. So as we start to cull, we'll want them to start slicking off sooner. That's a trait that we want, is for them to slick off as quickly as they can and not take a long time to do it. She's a little skinny. She's not terrible. She's thin. She's in good body condition, but she doesn't have that 8 and 5. She's kind of slender. The black one, I've noticed she's been a little thin lately. She's got a nice lamb with her. And this time of year is also when I kind of ease off on, like, oh, you look thin, yada yada, because they're moms and they've got kids and they're producing milk, and their bodies are kind of at their peak of need.
Giving everything.
Yeah.
You say you're going to cull in about another month, Rocco?
The end of this month.
At the end of this month.
The end of this month.
You have a. So, how many animals are you guessing?
Am I going to get rid of?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Hard to say.
1 or 2,
Yeah.
I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm gonna, you're not performing.
Yeah.
You're not doing what I want you to do.
Mm-hmm.
So either you got to go, or you got to get wormed, or you've got to get eaten.
So
Some of them that we identified like that last year are in here.
Yeah.
So they got to go as well.
So 2 or 3 years ago, you were culling more sheep, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For parasites, we were
Yeah,
culling
yeah,
more.
for-
Yeah, 2 or 3 years ago, we were culling more. The year before last was rough, Jim.
Yeah.
It was rough. We got out about 23% of our lambs,
Mm-hmm.
and you want that number, guys, to be about 20% or under, if you can help it.
Mm-hmm.
Again, because that's how much nature will take, okay? So, 23, yeah, that kind of stinks, but as long as it's not 40 or 50,
Right.
but again, man, if 20 goes to 18, goes to 17, goes to 15, that's what I'm concerned with. Basically, your animals are going to need minerals. Absolutely. This is the 8 choice program. There's 8 different minerals in here. The folks at Free Choice can really help you out with determining that, if that's the way you want to go. You can get minerals from the feed and seed. Basically, the long and short of it is that there's a whole bunch of minerals in one little bag, and so if they just need this or this or this, they got to deal with it all to get it. With this, they can sniff out more individually what they need and what they want. If they're lambing, if they're pregnant, if it's hot, if it's cold, if they're on high quality stuff, if they're on low quality stuff, will fluctuate within the mineral box. For cattle, a lot of times it's flat, and it's just this overlap of a thick rubber, and they come with their nose and they do this and they sniff and they lick it. I was like, oh cool, that'll be easy. I went through 4 of them. That's not true, I went through 3 of them. I brought it out here, I walked away, I looked over my shoulder, within 2 minutes all the sheep were on top of it, collapsed it, okay? So if you do get sheep and you do go with free minerals, do whatever you want to do to make it work. All you want is your minerals to be dry. But this is my old pickup truck bed liner, so there you have it.
They don't mind pushing that open.
This is light, super durable, and they can climb on it all day long. So ones that haven't slicked off this point into the season, and if they're in the process of doing it, I'll cut them some slack. But like those 2 and like that one there, like they still got a lot of hair on them. We want them to get rid of that. Everyone else is getting rid of it. Why aren't you? It's getting hot. Take your coat off. That kind of thing. Are there any questions?
Where are the donkeys? Why don't you have the donkeys in with them?
I don't have predator issues. I relate that a lot to the fence and to this netting. You saw how long it took our friends Mark and Lauren to take the netting up in this paddock. It takes a little bit longer. For me to set up one of those things right here, right now would take 4 minutes, okay? So that gives you an idea of chore time. And it's electric and it's hot, and I think that's why we don't have predators. We have 2 donkeys. The little donkey is being a little too curious with the new lambs.
I see. Good reason.
If you do have livestock guardians, donkeys or llamas or alpacas or an Anatolian or a Pyrenees or a Commodore, whatever, a dog, that's awesome, that's great. There's generally not a interaction. A lot of times the predator will come by and sense that there's a guardian in there and it'll move on because it doesn't want to put up a fight. That's usually what happens. So yeah, guys, that's it. Get a good lambing season, monitor your animals, look out for their body condition. High density grazing leads to long recovery periods, leads to a lot of sunlight hitting the growing points, leads to a lot of roots, leads to a lot of carbon sequestration, leads to a lot of humates and exudates on your roots, leads to a lot of humus and fertility on your farm. Away we go. Yeah, you're welcome.